and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Daryl Grove and I am not joined by Taylor Rockwell today. Instead, I'll be talking to George Quraishi of Howler magazine. George and I cover quite a lot of ground in this interview, including the US national team's style of play, the Columbus Crew situation, and the main reason I wanted to talk to George, the process for electing the president of US soccer. If you're wondering who gets to vote for the next president, it's complicated, but it is explained in today's episode thanks to George. If you're interested in subscribing to Howler magazine, the URL is fifa.wtf/gethowler. I'll put the link in the show notes. And if you listen carefully to the end of the interview, it seems George has reactivated the discount code from an old TSS ad. To be very clear, no money changed hands for this interview, especially if Taylor asks. Speaking of, I'll be reunited with my wonderful bearded co-host this Sunday evening, where we'll do our thumbs up, thumbs down review of all the weekend action, including, final reminder, US Under-17s Chris Durkin, Andrew Carlton et al. Versus England Under-17s, which is this Saturday morning, 10:30 Eastern on Fox Sports 2 and Universo. Okay, on to the interview.
Hello.
Hey, George. How you doing?
Hey, I'm good, man. How are you?
I am good. I'm recording already. Is that good with you?
That's fine, yeah. Do you want me to record on my end, or are you good?
No, I think I'm good. We have a good setup here. Yeah.
Cool. All right.
Yeah. But doing like Mark Maron style, you know, when the interview starts as soon as the guy walks in.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. All right. Fine. So all the jokes I prepared aren't going to work?
No, they definitely will. We'll hear all your jokes, George.
Yeah.
So am I right in picturing you at that big table in your front room?
Yeah, you know what? I've been renovating we have a single car detached garage in the back that I've been toiling over for the last few months. But we suffered some damage in the hurricane when a tree started to lean on it. So I was hoping to be out there, but I'm still where we were when you and I spoke. What was that? Like February? Golly.
Definitely January. I was there, wow. January 2017. Yeah.
Okay.
And all right, so Echo, I'm assuming Echo is around?
She's upstairs in her crate. We got a new one. She has a sister now named Ollie.
That's what I was going to ask. Yeah, I saw a new dog on Facebook.
Oh yeah. She's a little terror. We took her to the vet, and the vet said, "You know, she's got a lot of Echo's hair in her teeth." And I said, "Yep, sounds about right."
All right, and I wouldn't be surprised if we hear from at least one of them somewhere in this interview.
They're in the crates with like my version of sedation. It's these deer antlers that they love gnawing on. So I'm hoping they'll be quiet. Yeah.
We do peanut butter, bones full of peanut butter.
So smart, but messy.
Yes, very messy. Very messy. All right, George. So most people will know you as editor of Howler magazine. The first thing I want to ask you about is the big elephant in the room for all independent media is the US not going to the World Cup. It's almost like the elephant won't be in the room when we get to Russia. So my first question is, how has it?
I'm trying to think of how we can extend that metaphor. But, okay.
How has it affected your plans? Like, what changes are you making like for your planning for 2018?
Well, immediately we've made space in the next issue to investigate this. Have sort of an inquest into what do people across the spectrum of American soccer think went wrong, and how to fix what needs to be fixed. So I've had to push a few stories here and there to the next issue after this one so that we can make that room. But that's immediate. The second one, I've been, and I heard you and Taylor discussing this in the days after, and I had my own thoughts, but I don't know. I'm of two minds, actually. One is that it's an utter fiasco because it means that there will be so much less attention paid to the sport, and we all benefit when new fans join the fray, right?
Yeah,
and
exactly,
that won't happen this time to the extent that it has in the past. I think it'll still happen, but not nearly not nearly as much as it does when Tim Howard plays like he did against Belgium, or Landon Donovan scores that goal against Algeria. We won't have that moment that we all coalesce around.
The phrase I was using is nobody's going on the Tonight Show in sort of late July 2018.
Unfortunately that's true. And it'll be Cristiano Ronaldo and Messi again on the covers of Sports Illustrated and ESPN the magazine, and it won't be Christian Pulisic, unfortunately. Right. Yeah. But I also think that crisis. What is the phrase that newspapers really sell when war starts, or
right,
whatever.
Yeah. In crisis, there's an opportunity, kind of thing.
Yeah, there's a pithier way to say that. And the sales for Howler in the days after the World Cup failure were better than they would have been. I know that for a fact.
We had more sort of scouting network signups in the days after the World Cup failure.
Yeah. And I think part of it is people being like, what the heck happened? How can I figure this out? I'm trying to figure this out in my own head, and I need, I want to go to the places that I trust to help me do that. And I think part of it is a feeling of like, there's nothing I can do, and it's so frustrating. But maybe one thing I can do is support the places that are asking the right questions. And so I think it's a mix of those things. That's my hunch, at least. And I also think, Daryl, that, you remember how it was in 2014. Everyone was covering the World Cup. Places that have no business covering, and I mean that literally, covering the World Cup. Like, they don't cover soccer. They were covering the World Cup. And so I think that, my hunch is that there will be more oxygen for places like Howler, for places like TSS, to do this and be sort of the preeminent outlets that I think they should be, without competing necessarily with, multi-million-dollar organizations that are swooping in to take advantage of the news cycle.
Yeah, right, because Howler and Total Soccer Show and places like us sort of serve the core fan base, even when there's not sort of big splashy news happening. We're still watching the U17 World Cup, for example.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And if people want to know about that, like, it's thanks to you. I was listening to your podcast and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to look for some of these young guys. And when they're playing, and I watched that Monterrey game against Puebla.
It was Jonah Gonzalez.
Yeah, basically just because I was like, I've been hearing about this guy. I should be aware of, I'm aware of him, but I actually want to know how he plays. And I got to watch him, and it was a really interesting experience, and sort of I'm recalibrating the way that I want to approach watching soccer in the next few months, year, maybe forever, around this strategy of like, following these players. I think a lot of people already do that. I did not. I just watched whatever I thought would be the best game.
So what's your new strategy by watching these players? Do you mean sort of watching the youngsters that might be the core of the next US team? Yeah,
I do. And I want to know what a player like that brings to the team, or could bring to the team. I want to know what, we've assigned a profile of Weston McKennie for the next issue, because I want to know, Brian Blickenstaff is doing that one over in Germany. It's going to be great. And I want to know about these young players who are, think about this. We have, you guys touch on this all the time, but we have two, central midfielders starting for, but Monterrey, at least before they played Puebla and lost, were top of the table in Liga MX. Schalke is a big team in Germany. We got two starters who are teenagers for those teams, and neither has gotten a call from you. That is kind of an amazing fact, and it's not because the U.S. national team has evolved to the point where we don't need those kinds of players. It's just they didn't get a call.
Right.
And that's a baffling thing to me, and I want to try to figure it out.
Yeah, that goes to my next question was, do you think the failure of the US to get to the World Cup is micro or macro? And one of my arguments, I think there's a bit of both, right? The correct answer to almost any question like that is that there's some of both in it. But I really now look at the Bruce Arena era of the last few months, and him sort of saying, we just need these experienced guys to get us through qualifying. And, we don't have the luxury of calling in new players right now. And I look back and think, what if we called in Jonathan Gonzalez and Weston McKennie earlier on and just taken a risk and sort of integrated them into the team? Suddenly we'd be all talking about this. Maybe we'd be talking about this exciting young team that's going to the World Cup with Gonzalez and McKennie and Christian Pulisic and maybe Tyler Adams. Like, there's a different version of history where that happened.
Well, so this is going to sound like a cop-out answer, but it's not. And I'm going to explain why, but it's both. Okay.
Yeah.
And the reason is that, Bruce Arena is correct that when he came in, there was a crisis. He needed the guys he thought were going to get him to the World Cup. And he did I believe that he did his best to do that, and it failed.
Right.
But he did his best, for what it's worth. But the only reason that it was a crisis when Bruce Arena came in is because a lack of, I guess, leadership or foresight or soccer knowledge at the very top. And, that means that it was a crisis of our own making, basically. If Jurgen Klinsmann, who had the dual role of technical director and head coach, if we had a different technical director who had been there to, preserve some continuity between, the regime changes, who was sort of looking for a more long-term solution at every position rather than just, there's a fundamental tension between a technical director and a coach. The coach needs short-term results. The technical director needs long-term results. And so, but without that tension, you are really, you're really putting too much sway in the hands of someone who needs to win tomorrow and not, a year from now. And so, if we had better planning, better foresight on that front, on that technical front, Bruce Arena may have been hired, but it wouldn't have been under those conditions. And there may have been more of a concerted effort to bring in promising young players who clearly deserve a look, if nothing else.
Can we talk technical director then? Because I think you and I both kind of know that Jurgen Klinsmann's technical director role was mostly ceremonial. I'm not sure he did much actual technical directing. But I'm of the opinion that I'd love to actually see a proper technical director. And right now it's Tab Ramos, his youth technical director. But maybe there's a role for an actual technical director who is sort of literally above the US, not literally, is hierarchically above the US men's national team coach.
Sitting upon the head coach of the US.
Maybe literally, maybe we have him on a platform overlooking everything. But I mean, that's one possible way that we could really change the structure of how the US men's national team works, right? Is to have an actual technical director who is overseeing what the head coach does with a long-term view. Well,
look, again, the answer is it's a little complicated, right? And the problem with this is that at the club level, a technical director makes a ton of sense, right? Because you're making financial decisions with these players much more so than you are with the national team. So you need to be watching the budget, making sure, there was that, I think a great example that most of your listeners will understand is that pipeline, right? Where Barcelona had Guardiola. Later on, you got Xavi. Later on, you got you've got these amazing Busquets, Iniesta, Thiago, Alcantara, right? Players who are brought up to play in the same system and succeed one another as they age out, and that is like textbook technical. That is amazing technical directing, right? Overall, I mean, it's not one person who's responsible for that. It's like a whole structure that they've built. But
and it almost goes back to Cruyff, right? Like Cruyff taught Guardiola certain things, and that's passed on down the ages.
Yeah. It's continuity again, right? It's that idea that. We're going to develop players with an eye to them playing in this style, and it's a very defined way of playing. And Barcelona does that better than most clubs, right? For a national team, it's different because in most national teams, it's a much more passive process. And the national team is not responsible for developing talent. The U.S., it's a hybrid system in a sense. I mean, for a long time, clubs weren't doing that job. They're still just beginning to do it. And so the U.S. national team took on a lot more of that responsibility. That's why they built the the U17 residency program down here in Bradenton that they're now closing down.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is you're placing bets on a very small number of players. And as everyone knows, if you're really, really talented at the age of 17, there's no guarantee you're going to, make it to age 23 and still be, the best player in the country at your position. And that's a problem for us. We're just placing bets on way too few players under that system. And so a technical director for the U.S. team could do something toward instituting some kind of overall structure on the program and say, okay, we're going to play the same formation from U15 through the full national team. And that, therefore, those U15ers, when they're 7 years later, they are going to be really, really good at playing that system. They're going to know it. The problem is, and you could look at Spain again as an analogy and say, oh yeah, that worked really well for them because look how they played the same tiki-taka more or less with a few distinctions when they won the World Cup in 2010. The problem is they were just drawing most of their players, the core of that team from two clubs that were really proficient.
Yeah, it's kind of the Barcelona style with some like add-ons from Real Madrid, right?
Yeah, like some speed and toughness.
Yeah, and you reinforce it with like Sergio Ramos, for example, which is a very, very good reinforcement to have.
Yeah, he's like your last minute when you need a header to tie or win a game. He's the guy. Yeah. We don't have anything approaching a philosophy of play the way that those two clubs.
So I've kind of argued that there is a style of play and a philosophy of play that the U20s played at the U20 World Cup and the U17s are playing now, and it's kind of a fast counter-attacking style. And it's almost like if you watch the U17s right now, you'll see them if the other team is slowly building out of the back, you'll see them in their own half kind of almost bouncing up and down, just ready to take the ball off the other team. And it seems that there is a style that we take the ball back and then we just go as quickly as we can. And sometimes it leads to sort of through balls that don't come off or passes that are too quick. But it's a definite plan to just hit them hard when we get the ball back. And I see that at U17, I see it at U20, and I didn't see it at senior men's national team level. And I'm kind of hoping that one day we connect all those threads so that really is the style from top to bottom.
I mean, that used to be the style for the senior team.
Exactly.
Too.
I think that's the American style of play that people keep. I think people keep asking for an American style of play, but wanting it to be tiki-taka or possession, but not accepting that the actual successful style of play is like, run and gun, hit them hard on the counter-attack.
You probably remember the first hit Howler ever had for a story was in issue 1, Matthew Doyle writing What is American Soccer, and he defined he watched like hours and hours of tape from 1990 through the present day. At that time it was 2012, and defined this: run fast, try hard was his encapsulation. And that is exactly what if you think back to the last time the U.S. in a tournament that quote unquote mean something, and you'll see what I mean. And we were really successful. I would argue it was the 2009 Confederations Cup.
Yeah.
Think about that game against Spain. We won, defending European champion, about to become the world champion.
Right.
We went 2-0 up on Brazil, ended up losing 3-2. But I remember those goals, counterattacking, fast movement, Landon Donovan, Clint Dempsey, boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
Back to front, like in seconds. And I agree these young teams are doing that. And, maybe it has something to do with the fact that Tab Ramos is somewhat in charge. Like John Hackworth is obviously the coach, but, and bringing some of that DNA that did exist and we lost a bit, in the last few years at the senior level, back to those teams, which is good in my opinion. I think, it's great to say, this is my preferred. I think this is the most beautiful way to play, but you really got to play to the strengths of your players. And for us, the U.S., players tend to be less technical, more athletic, and really, really motivated. That seems like a pretty effective solution. I mean, I don't think. Look, we should be developing toward more technical players for sure. I 100% believe that. I think we should be playing five-a-side from a young age, unorganized, totally, good coaching, but for the love of the game until players really need to, sort of take a turn toward professionalization. That's my opinion. But
even then, you can still play that sort of run and gun, run fast, try hard, counter-attacking style with a higher technical ability. And all that it really does, in my opinion, is it makes the counter-attacks more effective. And the best example I can think of that is Andrew Carlton. If you watch that game against Paraguay, we counter-attacked, but we had a very, very skillful player at the heart of it. And it was just, he's able to spring passes that are inch perfect, that make those counter-attacks super effective. And he's able to do unexpected things like the famous Timothy Weah goal starts with an Andrew Carlton back heel in midfield that sort of splits open the midfield. So the more technical players you get, the better you can get at the style that you have.
That's probably true. I would say that there's something else that I think might be affecting this, which is that that style of play works really well when you're the underdog. And it worked against Spain, it worked against Brazil. We almost took Germany to overtime in 2002. We took Belgium to overtime in 2014. But in CONCACAF, we have become not the underdog, the overdog. We are expected to boss games, and it's much harder to do that with a counterattacking. I mean, you can still do it, but you really got to be good at it. And I don't know that the tactical stuff was there, especially when Klinsmann was the coach.
So maybe part of the technical director and next men's national team coach's job is to have sort of a World Cup plan, which might be the counterattacking style, and a CONCACAF plan, which is something that works, on the road against Honduras, against Panama, against Trinidad and Tobago, and anybody else that we might face.
Maybe. Honestly, that's a big question that I think we should be debating, and I'm not sure about the answer. But I do think there's a difference between playing qualifiers, especially away against CONCACAF opponents, and playing in the World Cup against Italy. That seems obvious to me. And you should approach those games differently. However, I would like to see one thing that is frustrating to me is this constant, what it feels like a constant change in approach. I mean, is Michael Bradley a number 10? Is he a number 6? to me, we are disserving our best players. Landon Donovan is a good example of this too. Was he a forward? Was he an attacking midfielder? Was he a winger? When we don't allow them to, and this is Fabian Johnson's main complaint too, when we don't allow them to, settle into a position, to really own a position on that team, when it's constantly in flux, it should not be that surprising, in my opinion, that the results are too.
So do you have any sort of favorites that you want to see for next head coach?
It's a really good question. I don't know. I don't know that I mean, I do, I guess. But they're less names and they're more like characteristics, right?
I see. Yeah.
I want somebody who is not afraid to experiment. I think that we again, that the incentive of the head coach is to get a result. And that does not mean, that they can run out a really young team and get spanked. And then, you really need some cojones to do that, right?
Yeah.
In many ways, I think Tab Ramos would be an interesting choice because he clearly has the standing to do that. And I've seen reports that he's resisting becoming the interim head coach just because, again, what does that label do? It incentivizes that coach not to plan for the future, which is already not their incentive. It really incentivizes them to say, I got to win the next 5 games so I can get the job full time.
Yeah, so you'd be in favour of maybe just Tab Ramos without the interim tag? Because I wouldn't necessarily be against that right now if that's what he's holding back for.
I mean, if you're willing to offer Jurgen Klinsmann a $2.5 million contract and then pay him severance, my understanding is that we're still paying him. I could be wrong about that.
Yeah.
Then I don't see the problem with offering Tab Ramos the job and then saying if it's not working, then we're just going to fire you. Like that's how soccer works everywhere.
Or maybe bring Klinsmann back in and make him earn the rest of that money.
Just don't like water boy, like ball boy.
Yeah. Okay. The other big change that may or may not happen is at the very top of US soccer. Right. There's the election for president will be in February 2018. And I noticed that on the Gulati teleconference, George, you got in there and asked a question about sort of the election process. And we've also, or the nomination process, right? That's what you asked about. But we've had a lot of TSS listeners asking about what exactly is the US soccer presidential election procedure. And I sent you an email before we did this call, maybe a couple of days ago, saying gather your information, see what you know. So I want to sort of put it to you, sort of to give an explanation of how the next US soccer president will be elected and by whom.
Yeah, like the nuts and bolts of how this goes down.
If that's okay with you, do you have that info?
Yeah, no problem.
All right.
I have a pretty good grasp of this, not a perfect grasp. So
okay,
I'll do my best.
Let's get into it.
At a high level, the next annual general meeting will take place in January, or is it February? It's early in 2018.
I'm pretty sure it's February.
Off to a good start. Yeah. That's right. And that is where this election will take place. 60 days before that happens, candidates who want to be on the ballot have to inform the nominating committee, and they have to have nominations from members of U.S. Soccer. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky and difficult to understand. So I'll do my best to explain what that means.
And this is one of the questions you asked was about the nominating procedure.
Yeah, there's been there are some changes since last year, and Sunil Gulati happens to sit on the nominations and governance board of U.S. Soccer. There was a question before mine saying, "Are you going to recuse yourself?" He said, "Yeah, of course I'll recuse myself from anything that affects this." But I don't believe he was recused when this change went into effect. And the change essentially says that it brings it into line with FIFA rules, which I noted in my question does not give me all that much comfort. But it essentially says,
"Yeah, I enjoyed the editorializing in the middle of a question."
Well, I mean, look, when you ask a question like that and you know you're not going to get a follow-up and it's Sunil, especially, who's very good at answering these questions in ways that don't necessarily reveal the answers, you have to sort of take out some of his outs, right?
Yeah.
And so I thought to myself, well, he could just say we did that to bring things in line with FIFA rules. And so if I took away that option, I figured I might have a better chance.
So it wasn't just a random jab; it was well thought out. All right.
No, I mean, think about that. He could just say, yeah, this brings us in line with FIFA rules. It's a great idea.
Yeah.
And question answered,
right?
So to speak.
Yeah, you wanted to cut that off. I like it.
Yeah. So anyway, what this does is it says essentially that so a candidate has to receive, I believe it's 3 nominations from members of U.S. Soccer, and it's defined who counts. There are various levels of membership, types of membership. There are some members who can nominate, some who cannot. But it's a good number who can. It also says that if any member nominates a candidate, and then they nominate a second candidate, then both nominations by that member are invalid. They're voided. And this creates an obvious problem if you are a challenger who is going to have difficulty finding nominations, because Sunil several weeks ago, and this is something I had heard, so I wanted to confirm with him, had sent out a letter asking members to nominate him. And so I said, together with this rule change, which was not well publicized, if you recall, the big news that came out of that annual general meeting was that there are now term limits for the president. And that was great. Like, we all celebrated that, but we didn't hear that it actually became harder to get on the ballot.
Right.
And so Sunil sent out this letter to members saying, hey, I'd really like your nomination, your support. So let's say you're a member and, hey, you get a letter from the guy who hasn't been challenged in the last 2 elections, right? And so you have a strong incentive. This is just a human thing to support that guy, because if you support him and he knows that, and then he wins, which seems really likely, he's going to look upon you with favor. This is politics. And if you don't, then that's a problem. And if you don't know that you can't nominate more than one person, if you think, I could just nominate Sunil, I'll get in his good graces, and then I'll also nominate, who knows, Eric
Steve
Ronaldo.
Gans,
sure, Steve Gans, right. And you don't realize that that's going to void both of those selections. Well, it's okay for Sunil. He's got, presumably hundreds of other people who can nominate him. He'll be fine. Steve Gans will have a much harder time finding those nominations if all of his likely nominators have already also nominated Sunil. So That was my question for Sunil. I said, it really appears that you're trying to lock up it sort of reminded me of, in several ways, U.S. soccer reminds me of the Democratic Party right now, but it reminds me of the way that Hillary Clinton had so locked up big donors that people were really reluctant to enter that race because they said, there's just no money left to run against her.
I say, yeah, I get that. So it's Sunil Gulati essentially stacking the field in his favor before the election even starts.
And again, there's nothing illegal about this, and there's nothing really wrong with it in any moral sense. It's good politics, and Sunil has gotten where he is because he's an excellent politician.
Okay, so when it comes to actual vote, and I should say I did see a story that Steve Gans has locked up enough nominations to be on the ballot. I think it became official a couple of days ago that he'll be in the election.
Yes.
And we have until December something. I think December 7th is the date I have in my head for people like Eric Ronaldo or Landon Donovan, which has been rumoured for, other people to get on the ballot. So we could end up with a US soccer presidential election that actually has multiple nominees, and, we have to hear them out, and there's kind of a race to see who is elected. Worth noting, you and I, unless there's something about you that I don't know, can't vote in this, right? There's a lot of people cannot vote in this. So do you have the sort of info in front of you for who will actually do the voting when the election comes around?
Yeah, I'll try to make that clear because it's pretty complex. But I'll just add to what you said and say that I interviewed Paul Lapointe yesterday, who's another person who wants to run. For a future episode of Dummy, I'm trying to speak with every possible candidate and just
a good idea.
Really basically put them all in one podcast, not talking to each other, but talking to me, so that people can listen and sort of say, side by side, this is who's running. So anyway, and Paul Lapointe told me that he is not there yet, but he thinks he will get there, and he didn't want to name who is supporting him for, I think, obvious reasons, but there you go. Okay, so how does one get elected? So assuming you can get on the ballot and there's a contested race, which I think would be an excellent thing just for the health of any democracy, the vote comes down to what's called the National Council. And there are all these councils within U.S. soccer. There are members. A member is sometimes an individual and sometimes an organization. So, the Florida State Youth Soccer Association, I believe, could be a member. And depending on what category you're in, whether you're part of youth soccer or adult amateur soccer or professional soccer, or you're an athlete, you would have representation and the ability to become a delegate on one of these councils. So just to try to break this down, and one thing that I found really helpful in trying to understand this was to go back to the minutes of last year's annual general meeting.
George, I did the exact same thing.
Yeah. It was super helpful, right? Because because you've got basically the guy in charge of this doing the roll call, explaining exactly how the stuff is broken down.
Mr. Kepner.
Mr. Kepner, that's right. Who made he's I think he was. It's hard to read from the minutes, but I think he was trying to make some jokes. Yeah. Okay, so 3 of those councils receive equal voting power, right? It's the youth council, made up of all interested parties who are admitted in the youth soccer realm. That's the largest in terms of number of people. That's the largest group. I think it's 193. I'm trying to find this now that I brought this up. I just pulled that number totally out of the air.
Yeah. Well, I think in some ways the numbers don't matter, because what I understand is that they then equalize everything so that people get an equal percentage of the vote.
That's exactly right. They have a multiplier, and so I think so the youth council, they get basically 293 as their weight. Council weight is what he called it, right? And then that goes through a multiplier. In order to reduce it, or sorry, the others go through a multiplier in order to get the weight of their collective vote up to, I believe it's 25.8 or something percent of the vote, something around there.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And so that share is shared equally by the youth council, the adult council, and the pro council. And so it's interesting. So the pro council, I believe, has 13 members. So their their weight is basically multiplied by 1,000% in order to make it equal to the weight of the youth council. So it's 13 people who have an equal say to the the 293 that represent the youth council.
That's what really struck me, is if you are the Florida Youth Soccer Association or the Virginia Youth Soccer League, I'm sorry, I don't know the actual name, but you have a vote, but your vote is going to be very watered down because other votes are weighted much, much more strongly. For example, if you're representing Major League Soccer on the professional council, your vote is worth 1,000% more than the youth soccer team.
Yeah, it's not dissimilar to the way that a California resident's vote is worth a lot less than a resident of, Rhode Island. Because,
yes, there we go. Yeah.
So, and then athletes get 20%. That's mandated by law. And so, so then we're up to roughly, what is that? 75, 76, 77% plus 20. We're up to 97%. So, and then the final votes are, some of these
miscellaneous.
Yeah. These stragglers, these like sort of,
life members, I think is
board members, life members, sustaining members, and there are various definitions for each of those. But
is it 2 fans as well? Did I read a story a while back that 2 fans are included in the miscellaneous vote?
2 fans.
Yeah.
I wonder who those 2 fans are. I don't know who they are.
I would love to know that. Yeah, but that seems very. It's great to have a voice in the democracy, but it's such a small voice that it's almost tokenism. I want to say.
Oh, it's complete tokenism. It's a way for them to say, yeah, fans have a voice, but without giving them a voice. Yeah. And no, I cannot vote. You cannot vote. I would love to vote, but I also think that the role of the media is probably to observe and explain this stuff and not to participate. You then get into a problem where you're covering something in which you have an interest in.
I think that sinks the whole thing, right? It makes you impartial.
Totally.
Yeah, like if the New York Times could vote in the Democratic primaries, that would be weird.
I was thinking about this. I was thinking, could Howler become like a national affiliate, which I think the definition is you have members in 26 states. You would need 1,000 people in each of those states to be paying dues members. But I was thinking if we could get our readership up to that point, would we qualify, as like, we've got dues paying members in 26 states. Like we want to be a national affiliate. I don't think that would work, but it did cross my mind.
You could try it. So if someone did want to vote in this election, someone asked me this, like, how could I vote in this? The only thing I could think would be to join it's probably easy to join your local sort of amateur soccer association or your local youth soccer association and be elected within that as the delegate that goes to the national council.
Yeah, that's really the only way.
Yeah, and then even then your vote is a lot smaller than say the MLS or USL or NWSL vote. Yeah,
that's exactly right. I mean, and then but you can also
or NASL. I don't want to leave them out just in case someone got.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. NWSL. So the other way is to become a really good soccer player and go through it that way.
We should get on that.
Yeah, I'm working on it. I got the first red card of my life last night.
Oh, George. Oh, were you playing at the Tampa Fives? It's called Cinco, I believe.
Yeah, I was.
What'd you do?
I intercepted a pass between from one center back on the other team to the other center back, so I was in on goal.
Yeah.
the dude just stomped on my foot and the referee just let it play. And that was like the third or fourth really bad call that we'd received. And Daryl, I swear to you, I always thought this was a total excuse, but I completely lost control of my senses and my faculties.
Yeah.
I ran over to the ref and I'm screaming at him, and he's like, what, I honestly can't tell you what I said, but I basically showed him what had happened to me by stomping on his foot.
Oh,
I know I assaulted a ref. It was a really bad, I felt awful as soon as I had done it. And he just pulled it. I really like this guy too. He's one of the guys who runs Cinco Soccer. I know him pretty well. He's an excellent dude. And I completely lost it. And I bought a beer, sat down on the stands and just watched the rest of the game from the stands.
Did you talk to him afterwards?
Yeah, I went up and I apologized. I think he was pretty heated about it in the moment too, and, which is understandable. I was totally inappropriate. But,
wow. I guess she'd be glad that wasn't televised, but now you've revealed it on a podcast and lots of people will know.
Yeah, all you got to do is really, I don't know, I guess you can get to me. I thought it was tougher than that. But I can totally, but I thought of Zidane, and it's a completely different situation. But I was like, you know what? I finally kind of get it.
Oh, how he just kind of like maybe sort of blacked out for a minute and didn't quite know what he was doing.
Yeah, I mean, I had paid $8 to go play soccer, and I got about 5 minutes of playing in, and I was just mad at myself for that too, because I was like, this is my exercise for the week.
Yeah.
I can only imagine, he had many other really good reasons not to do what he did, but he still did it. And I've been wondering about that since it happened, and I still wonder about it, but I think I'm starting to understand a little bit better.
So maybe this is why you're not national council material.
I don't know, man. I don't know. It depends. I mean,
I can't be stamping on people's feet in the middle of the election.
Isn't the argument that U.S. soccer needs a little stamp on the foot to get its stuff together?
Yeah, maybe you could just be the enforcer at the election.
Right, I'm the hard man.
Yeah, like someone, maybe Steve Gans or Eric Ronaldo or Paul Lapointe or Sino Galati could hire you to sort of go around and be like, hey, who are you voting for? And if they give the wrong answer, you stamp on their foot.
Yeah, although really it has to be. It came from within. It's not a,
you can't fake it.
I'm not for hire.
You can't fake it. It's got to be, it's got to be real.
Yeah.
All right, George, I didn't think we'd get to talk about your red cards at Cinco, but I'm very glad we did. The other thing I wanted to talk about was Columbus Crew, because I think of you as someone who's very sort of, what's the word? Very sort of interested in soccer fandom, right? A lot of Howler magazine, it's not just about teams and tactics and clubs and players. There's also a lot about soccer fandom. So I'm wondering how you're processing this Columbus Crew situation. Yeah,
this is something I care really deeply about, as I know you do. And I'm sorry to plug Dummy, my podcast, for a second time. But in the one that's going to be released in about an hour or two, I have two conversations. One with Morgan Hughes, who you mentioned yesterday on your podcast. And it's a really emotional interview. And I also speak with a guy named Josh Jackson, who is a member of, MLS to Austin. I met him last year, or I guess earlier this year at South by Southwest, and really had a great time with him. He is gleeful over the events, and it's a really jarring juxtaposition.
Wait, he's not the Paste magazine editor, Josh Jackson, is he?
No,
different guy. Okay, sorry. So
no, he's a regular fan. He's not, he doesn't come from like the soccer industry, which is refreshing in a lot of ways. But I was surprised at how openly happy he was about this, because I think that there are a lot of reasons to be really cautious about this and not so happy about it. At least that's what I thought.
So is he gleeful because he wants a team in Austin?
He wants a team in Austin, and he recognizes that under the current structure of soccer in this country, this is pretty much the only way to get one, a top flight team. You're not going to get. You either need someone with a ton of money to put in an expansion bid and pay several $100 million, and not even have a sure shot of getting it. Yeah. Or you need to steal someone else's team, and that is what's going down. It seems like. And I should say that way of phrasing it really puts the onus on these supporters. I don't want to do that. In fact, I want to draw a clear distinction between them and the owner of the team, Anthony Precourt, because I really actually sympathize with the MLS to Austin people. They really just want a soccer team, and I totally get that. Nothing to me is more understandable than that. The person that I really hold responsible is Precourt, because I mean, all the things he cited as reasons for leaving were evident, or should have been evident to anyone doing their due diligence 4 years ago when he bought the club, and inserted this very specific loophole in the contract where he could bring it to no other city except Austin. So it seems like this has been the plan for all along, and that seems like he's been running the team in bad faith, in my opinion. since the beginning.
And I get the feeling that a lot of people knew that this was coming for quite a long time, but it's only sort of broken in the last week or so. Like, I'll bet there are people somewhere who knew like a year ago that maybe that Precourt was planning to move Columbus to Austin. Which
is baffling, because there are ways to plan for this kind of thing to minimize like the public relations fallout. There are ways to do something this nefarious, I guess I'll say. And he didn't do any of those. He did it really in a, I'll say, I guess, ham-fisted way.
Yep. And then there are stories about the people who bought 2018 season tickets now will not be refunded.
Yeah, it's infuriating, right? Yeah. It's just absolutely infuriating. So those interviews really helped me think about this. I'll just share with you what I've been thinking about is this book of short stories by Ha Jin. You know, this writer named Ha Jin. He's a Chinese writer who now lives, I think, in Atlanta. He's really fantastic. I haven't read this book I'm thinking about in particular called The Bridegroom since probably 2003 or something. But what he does is so amazing. It's these short stories that show how people live daily life in China under this communist regime. And we tend to think of that as being this monolithic thing. In reality, there are like all these sort of layers to it. It affects daily life for someone in the city or the countryside in very different ways. But humans, because we're so adaptable, have been able to figure out how to live in some non-natural state, right? Was it Rousseau, or I guess, who posited that we all started in this natural state, and so then or Hobbes, or maybe Locke. I don't know. I'm getting my philosophers wrong, but we've created this really bizarre structure for human life, and people figure out how to thrive there. So, in a sense, I started thinking about this because I'm like, this is the structure that American soccer fans are living under. And when you think of it that way, and you think of the motives of someone like Josh Jackson, they become, if not, I wouldn't say admirable necessarily. I think, if he were to take a step back and look at this objectively, he would say, yeah, a team shouldn't covet someone else's team. That's just not right. Start your own team. Yeah. But I also think that I understand his motivations now a lot better when I think of it through that framework. And then if you were to make the analogy with China, you would say that Columbus Crew is kind of like maybe one of those towns that people live in. The central planning of the Chinese government just decides we're building a new train, and we're just going to demolish your town and build it straight through there. Yeah, it's like you've invested. Move, you've invested in various ways: time, money, energy, in this collective thing that nobody really owns, in a spiritual sense. And all of a sudden, you find out that 21 years of investment will not be paying off for you in terms of like all the things you want out of a club, like the ability to take your grandkid to a game. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like that really, really sucks. So do you believe that it's possible to sort of fight this in some way? Oh yeah, I completely think it's possible to fight it. I think it's, as I put it to Josh, like, aren't you worried that this new team will become like the Death Star of Major League Soccer? I don't necessarily think that there's an obvious way to fight it or like a surefire way to fight it. But I think that like fans, Alexi Lawless had a quote today, and I think he's a listener of the show. And so, I'll bring this up. He said, like looking forward to another day of telling someone how to spend their money and, blah, 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 which seemed to really set off a hornet's nest of fans being angry, like saying, and I understand what Alexi's saying. Yeah, it's a business. Teams are also, trusts, right? They derive their value from the attention of the people who love that team and who go to that team. And I'm not just talking about monetary value, but also, again, that word spiritual value, right? Yeah. What is this thing? What is it invested with? It's invested with these people. And so I really prefer to look at pro sports teams the way that the English do, you guys do, which is that they are rooted to a place and immutable from that. Like the one time this happened before, MK Dons became a pariah. And I think that's how it should be. The owner of a team, yeah, sure, you're the steward of that team. But the gall to take that collective thing and just rip it out of a community from which it derives everything that matters about it is just really astounding, in my opinion. And I think a lesson was learned in England to never, ever, ever do that again because of the reaction and all the bad PR. And, the MK Dons haven't been particularly successful. And AFC Wimbledon, the fan-created team, is sort of
almost at the same level now, I think. So
no, they recently passed them in the league structure, which was like, I think that was like last season.
There
right?
we go. Yeah, I should know that. Right, I should
awesome.
have known that from Ryan Bailey's goal math updates.
Totally. Yeah.
But yeah, I think. But the lesson there was like, don't do this again because you will not succeed.
Yeah, and unfortunately, American sports are very different. I mean, we tend to think of America being more capitalist, Europe being more socialist. In this realm, it's completely reversed. I mean,
I'm always aware of that. It's a very strange paradox.
The NFL, the MLB, it's a welfare state where teams they share losses, they share profits, and so I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I'm always in favor of more fan mobilization, more fan involvement, more fan action, more power.
Yeah.
I think you got to take it. No one's going to give it to you. You have to demand it. And whether that means demonstrating, staying away, unfortunately there are no more home regular season Columbus Crew games. If they win at NYCFC, I think they have a chance of hosting a playoff game. If I were a fan of the, I'm doing this as a journalist. I'm interested to see how this plays out. I think there will be a winner and there will be a loser in either scenario, right? But as a human, as a person who thinks about the long-term health of soccer in this country, you think about the lengths MLS has gone to create a sense of authenticity and tradition and history. And part of that is naming your teams Real and Dynamo and FC, which none of those have any relation to soccer in the United States. But then you want to take a team that's been around since 1996 that has, I'll just be frank, one of the ugliest crests I've ever seen, that original Crew crest. The new one's not any better. But you know what? God love them. They love that crest, and they should. And so, you know what?
I mean, it's 20 years of history, right?
And there's no way you can't manufacture that. It's the only way to attain that is to let things marinate in a specific place for a long time and develop their own peculiarities and traditions. And Columbus has done that as well as any other team.
Yeah. I mean, especially with all the US national team games and all that, there's a rich history of soccer there, and it really worries me that the whole region could be turned against MLS, but maybe even the sport of soccer. You could have people in Columbus and surrounding areas that are sort of like, all right, I'm done with soccer.
And what percentage of US fans would you say would call that US-Mexico game in the Hex in Columbus like a sacrosanct tradition of American soccer? I would say 99%.
Yeah, I mean, maybe less so after this past year.
No, screw that. Screw that. You can't take a loss and say, oh, we're going to throw,
Oh, okay,
no.
yeah, you're right.
You say, no, we're going to go back and we're going to own them again in that stadium. Like, that's what you say. And so we're in a situation now where the decision of like one, maybe two people, I saw Don Garber say, oh, it's understandable that he wants to move. Screw that. Screw that so hard. It is not understandable. It's ridiculous. Again, I'm editorializing here. I did speak with Josh with an open mind. And I am sympathetic to people who want top flight soccer in their cities, but screw it.
So one suggestion was, I'm assuming Morgan would have told you that the SaveTheCrew.com is a website where you can sign up and they're going to try and organize. What I'd really hope for is some collective action from all Major League Soccer fans.
I would take that farther. I would say all American soccer fans. Yeah,
all American soccer fans.
I would love to see banners about this at NWSL has finished college games. You know what I mean? Like, I would love to see everybody getting involved and saying, I won't stand for this. If it can happen there, it can happen to me. And you know what? Some things are more important than making extra money.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Okay, we should probably end there because I feel like we could complain about the Columbus Crew situation for a long time, but it's time for people to sort of get out there and take some action, I think. So,
Daryl, can I say one more thing?
Absolutely, yeah.
It's unrelated, but it's sort of related to the first thing you asked me about, the media environment.
Yeah.
I wanted to thank you and Taylor for the ads you guys have done. I want to sort of reveal that, a little bit of this. It's hard being an independent soccer media entity, as you guys know. Like, it's a grind. You don't. It's not financially very rewarding. It's
no Ferraris. It's a no Ferraris game.
But and a lot of times, it can be hard to bridge the gap between like the really corporate media that is getting its funding from corporate office and places like you and me where we are making it ourselves. But we pay you guys a real rate to advertise for us, and it is worth it several times over because your listeners have been subscribing to Howler, which I am just so appreciative for. And I don't know, it's like that gives me a lot of hope for the future of independent soccer journalism, because if we can sort of do that together, that's a great sign. We don't need to live off the scraps of the bigger people. We don't need to. I don't know. It just really, it's heartening. So I wanted to thank you and thank the listeners for
thank you for advertising, because I thought of this as well. It was a genuine thing where we made money and you got subscribers. That's how capitalism should work, right? It's the good version of capitalism where everybody wins.
And I didn't want to say this, but
not the Anthony Precourt version.
Yeah, if it hadn't worked, I was going to pick up Howler and we were going to move to Canada. So.
What would you rename it to something Canadian?
Yeah, we would become like a curling magazine.
I think I would still read it just to see what was up.
No, you wouldn't. That's okay though.
All right. So, George, I'll tell you what, if people would like to subscribe to Howler, what's the best URL for them to go to?
Oh yeah. Go to FIFA.wtf/gethowler.
You love having that URL, don't you?
Oh yeah. FIFA.wtf was like the best purchase I ever made. And Daryl, I hope this is okay. I didn't pay you for this, but I'm going to just reenact that discount code that we gave you guys a couple weeks ago, TSS2 for all your listeners. So
it's still good?
It is today.
Oh, well, okay. All right.
Today through let's say the end of the weekend, okay?
Okay. Oh, so you've finagled a free ad at the end of this interview, it seems like.
I got a free ad, but you know what? We're going to be a return advertiser. So that's like the one for you, one for me type deal, right?
Okay, no problem. But I'm going to end it there before you advertise anything else.
I'm also going to send you a check, like a private check. So, this is how FIFA corruption happens. Taylor is not going to see any of that, but you're going to get a little bunk.
Yeah, make it out to Daryl. There you go. That's good stuff. Yeah. All right, George, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Hey, man, I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.